His friend's laughter felt like a physical blow. Marry her? I'd sooner bet a barn cat. Julian Caldwell's sneer was visible even through the half-open door. Outside, a cobblestone shifted under my slipper. I had heard enough. My heart hammered against the cool marble, a frantic drum against the chilling words. I was Lady Lyra Beaumont, and I knew Julian Caldwell spoke of me. He thought me a meek pawn, easily controlled by the substantial dowry my late father had so desperately secured to protect our dwindling family name. My father's sacrifice, intended to guarantee my future, now tasted like bitter ash in my mouth. I knew of Julian's own crippling debts, a silent burden he hoped my fortune would erase. This marriage, I realized, was not just a convenience. It was a transaction, and I was merely the currency. The fire crackled, mirroring the growing inferno within me, as Julian's companions burst into louder laughter. My dear dead father left me with so many debts that I need every penny. Julian's voice, now colder, sliced through the air. He then detailed his malicious plans, to parade mistresses, to humiliate me before society, even at our wedding breakfast. The thought of such calculated cruelty, of a man so devoid of honor, sent a fresh wave of disgust through me. Their chuckles echoed, a chorus to his vile intentions, confirming a premeditated degradation that I could not, would not bear. The leather-bound book, a treatise on ancient virtues, slipped from my shaking hands, hitting the polished marble floor with a sharp, undeniable thud. The laughter inside ceased abruptly, replaced by a sudden, anxious silence. What was that noise? Julian's voice, now sharp with suspicion, cut through the quiet. Before anyone could move, a strange, potent calm settled over me. My shaking hands stilled. I pushed the heavy oak door open wide, stepping into the gilded room. My chin was high, my back straight, and my green eyes, I knew, blazed with a fire that would scorch. The four men scrambled to their feet, their faces blanching, then reddening with immediate, profound embarrassment. Miss Beaumont, Julian stammered, his usual arrogance replaced by shocked disbelief. We didn't know you were... Obviously, I replied, my voice calm and steady, a surprising steel in its tone that even startled me. My gaze locked onto Julian's, unwavering. I came to return a book to your library, Your Grace. I had no idea I would receive such an education about my future husband's character. The other three men looked as though they wished to melt into the opulent wallpaper. Lord Ashworth cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should give you two some privacy, he mumbled, already sidling toward the door. No, please stay, I said, my voice sweet, never breaking eye contact with Julian. I'm sure you'll want to hear this too, since you seem so interested in my dowry and my appearance. Julian visibly straightened his shoulders, attempting to reclaim his composure, his most arrogant expression settling upon his features. Lyra, you're being dramatic. Men talk freely among friends. You shouldn't have been listening to a private conversation. A private conversation about me, I shot back, my voice beginning to rise. About how boring and plain I am. About how you plan to humiliate me with your mistresses. He recoiled slightly, but his pride surged. Well, it's not as if this is a love match, he said coldly. Our fathers arranged this marriage for business reasons. We both know that. I stepped closer, my eyes never leaving his. You're absolutely right, Your Grace. This is not a love match, but I thought we could at least have respect for each other. I thought we could try to build something decent together. My voice dropped to a near whisper. I was clearly wrong. Then before anyone could react, I drew back my hand and slapped Julian hard across his left cheek. The sound echoed through the quiet room like a gunshot. His head snapped to the side and a bright red mark bloomed on his pale skin. How dare you, he hissed, raising his own hand. Go ahead, I said, standing perfectly still, my voice clear. Hit me. Show these gentlemen what kind of man you truly are. Show them how the great Duke Caldwell treats a woman. Julian's hand froze in the air, his eyes darting to his friends, who stared with wide, horrified eyes. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered his arm. I'm calling off this engagement, I announced, pulling the diamond ring from my finger and throwing it at his feet. It clattered against the marble, a stark sound in the charged silence. I turned to leave, but Julian grabbed my arm. "You can't break our engagement," he said desperately, his voice raw. "The contracts are signed. Your father will never agree to it." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. "Let go of me," I said quietly, but there was steel in my voice. He released me immediately. "You're right about the contracts," I said with a sad, knowing smile. "My father cares more about this business deal than he does about my happiness, and your debts mean you can't afford to let me go." I bent down and picked up the ring, sliding it back onto my finger. "So I suppose we're stuck with each other." Julian looked utterly confused. "Then why did you—" "Consider it a warning, Your Grace," I interrupted, my voice returning to that eerily calm tone. "You think I'm just a plain, boring mouse who will quietly let you walk all over her. You think you can treat me like dirt, and I'll just take it with a smile." I stepped closer to him again, so close he could see the gold flecks in my green eyes. "You're about to learn just how wrong you are." The three other men exchanged nervous glances, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. "What's that supposed to mean?" Julian asked, trying to sound tough, but uncertainty laced his voice. "It means, dear husband-to-be," I smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind a cat might give a mouse before pouncing. "That you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. You wanted to marry a mouse." I straightened my shoulders and lifted my chin higher. "Congratulations, you're about to marry a lioness instead." I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "The wedding is still on, gentlemen. 3 weeks from Saturday, just as planned." My eyes found Julian's again. "I suggest you use that time to prepare yourself, Your Grace, because once I become your Duchess, your real education is going to begin." With that, I swept out of the room, leaving 4 very shaken men behind me. I leaned against the cool wall in the hallway, taking deep, steady breaths. My heart still raced, but I felt something I had never felt before. Power. For 22 years, I had been the obedient daughter, the quiet lady, the mouse everyone could ignore. Not anymore. As I walked back toward the main house, my mind was already spinning with plans. Julian Caldwell thought he could humiliate me. He thought he could treat me like a business transaction. He was about to discover that his plain, boring little bride-to-be was much more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The war between us had just begun, and I intended to win. Julian sank into his leather chair, touching his stinging cheek. For the first time in his life, he had met someone who wasn't afraid of him, someone who had looked him in the eye and promised him consequences for his cruelty. "Well," Lord Ashworth said weakly, trying to lighten the mood, "that was unexpected." "Shut up," Julian muttered, pouring himself another brandy with shaking hands. He was beginning to understand that he hadn't married a mouse after all. He had married a master strategist, and she was just getting started. "Sleep well, husband," her voice echoed in his memory. "Tomorrow your real education begins." As Julian slowly climbed the stairs to his lonely guest bedroom, he realized with growing dread that Lyra Beaumont was a woman who kept her promises, and he was about to learn exactly what it cost to underestimate her. The morning of my wedding dawned not with sun-kissed promise, but with a sky heavy and gray, mirroring the leaden weight in my own chest. St. Michael's Cathedral, usually a beacon of light, felt like an imposing fortress under the low-hanging clouds. I stood at the altar, adjusting my white gloves for what must have been the 10th time, though my hands trembled too much for the gesture to hold any grace. Lady Lyra's blazing green eyes, her chilling smile, the steel in her voice, they haunted my thoughts, a specter refusing to be banished by the solemnity of the occasion. "She'll calm down, Julian," Lord Ashworth had said, attempting a jovial tone as he clapped my shoulder moments before. "Women always get emotional before the vows. Once she sees all the benefits of being a duchess, she'll come around." Sir Alistair merely nodded, swirling brandy in a glass that was far too early for the hour. But their dismissive confidence did nothing to soothe the knot of dread tightening in my gut. I had seen something in Lyra's eyes, a promise of consequences that those simpletons could not comprehend. This was not a woman to simply come around. This was a force. Seron. A ripple of whispers, like a sudden gust of wind through dry leaves, swept through the 300 assembled guests. My head snapped toward the grand cathedral doors as they swung open, a slow, deliberate creak that seemed to echo through the hallowed space. I expected to see the same quiet, unremarkable woman I had so cruelly dismissed, the meek pawn I had thought to control. Instead, my breath hitched. My jaw, I fear, dropped open in an undignified display. The woman who began her stately walk down the aisle was not the Lyra Beaumont I remembered. Her chestnut hair, once simply styled, was now an elegant cascade, framing her face with an artistry that sculpted her cheekbones, making them sharper, more defined. The wedding dress, a masterpiece of ivory silk and French lace, clung to her figure in all the right places, revealing curves I had never bothered to notice. But it was her face that truly stunned me. Her skin seemed to glow, her lips a perfect shade of rose, and her green eyes, those eyes that had haunted my dreams, sparkled with an undeniable confidence and something else I couldn't quite name. It was an ethereal beauty, commanding every gaze. "Is that truly the Beaumont girl?" a voice whispered, disbelief coloring the air. "She's absolutely breathtaking," another replied, tinged with envy. "The Duke is a fortunate man." Fortunate? I did not feel fortunate. I felt exposed, confused, and somehow deeply threatened. This was no mouse. This woman looked like she could command armies, hold her own against any challenge, and I knew with a chilling certainty that she intended to do exactly that. Cruelty, 15. As Lyra reached the altar, her gaze met mine, unwavering. A polite, proper bride's smile graced her lips, but underneath I saw the undeniable gleam of steel, a silent reminder of her promise. She was here to collect, and I was about to pay. "Dearly beloved," the priest began, his voice a low, solemn drone that seemed to stretch into an eternity. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of His Grace, Duke Julian Caldwell and Lady Lyra Beaumont, in holy matrimony." The ceremony continued, each word feeling like a hammer blow. I found myself studying her face, searching for answers. How had I been so blind? Had she deliberately hidden this radiance, or had my own prejudice painted her in the shades of gray? When the time came for her vows, her voice, clear and strong, carried easily through the grand cathedral. "Do you, Lady Lyra, take this man to be your husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" Her eyes never left mine as she answered, her voice firm. "I do." But then she added something, a whisper of intent that made my blood run cold, though the priest seemed to notice nothing amiss. "And I promise to be the wife you deserve, Your Grace." The words hung in the air, innocent to all but me. She was not promising devotion, she was promising retribution. She was vowing to give me precisely what my cruelty had earned. My hand as I reached for the ring trembled. Hers, when she offered it, was steady as a rock. Chapter 30. My voice, when I spoke the traditional vows, came out rougher than I intended. "With this ring, I thee wed." Lyra repeated the words, her gaze locked with mine as she slid the gold band onto my finger. Her grip, for a fleeting moment, was just a little too tight. "And with it, I bind myself to you completely, my lord husband." Again, perfectly normal to every ear but mine. I heard the implicit threat. She wasn't going anywhere. Whatever she had planned for me, I would not escape it. The priest pronounced us husband and wife, and I leaned down to kiss my new bride. Her lips were soft, surprisingly warm, but the touch felt less like a romantic moment and more like a challenge thrown. A subtle, dangerous spark passed between us. As we separated, her voice, so soft only I could hear, brushed my ear like a silken blade. "Let the games begin." The formal end of the ceremony, yes, but for us it was merely the beginning of the contest. A chill, unlike any winter wind, settled in my bones. 0:45. The wedding breakfast, held in Blackwood Manor's grand ballroom, became Lyra's stage. She moved through the throng of guests like she had been born to be a duchess, not merely a lady from a lesser estate. Her wit charmed, her grace captivated. She accepted congratulations and compliments with effortless poise, her radiant smile never faltering. I watched in growing amazement, a knot of dismay tightening in my stomach, as she navigated conversations about politics, literature, and society gossip with an ease I rarely possessed myself. "Your bride is absolutely delightful," gushed Lady Morrison, London's most prolific gossip, her eyes wide with admiration. "So intelligent and well-spoken. You are a very fortunate man, Your Grace." "Indeed she is," I replied automatically, my mind spinning. Where had this confident, socially astute woman been hiding? Had she truly been pretending all along, or had I simply been too arrogant to see past my own preconceived notions? As the afternoon wore on, a troubling pattern emerged. Every conversation Lyra had, every perfectly polite phrase, seemed designed to subtly diminish me, to highlight my perceived flaws. When Lord Chester complimented her knowledge of French literature, she replied, "Oh, I do love to read. My husband, alas, prefers more vigorous outdoor pursuits." The way she said vigorous made it sound less like hunting and riding, and more like drinking and dissolute gambling. When Mrs. Ashworth inquired about our honeymoon plans, Lyra smiled sweetly and said, "His Grace has been so occupied with his many social obligations that we haven't had time to discuss it properly. But I am quite certain he will make time for his wife, eventually." Her tone was impeccable, but the impression left on everyone within earshot was clear. I was neglecting my beautiful, brilliant new bride. It was a subtle, exquisite torture. Continuing 1. The final blow came not from a guest, but from my own mother, the Dowager Duchess Eleanor Caldwell. She pulled me aside in a quieter corner of the emptying ballroom, her expression beaming with approval. "Julian, your wife is absolutely charming," she declared, her praise a dagger to my pride. "I had my doubts about this arranged marriage, but I can see now that your father chose very well indeed. She's going to make an excellent duchess." "Thank you, Mother," I managed, my voice weak, my world continuing to tilt on its axis. "You must promise me you'll treat her well," she continued, her voice turning unexpectedly serious. "A woman of her quality deserves respect and affection. Do not make the same mistakes your father made with me." I nodded, feeling utterly defeated. Just 3 weeks ago, Lyra had been a plain, quiet girl, lucky to catch a duke. Now, thanks to her undeniable transformation and insidious manipulations, society saw her as a prize, and me as the fortunate, perhaps undeserving, recipient. The quiet counsel of my mother, once a source of comfort, now sealed my public humiliation. The last carriage rumbled away, leaving Blackwood Manor's grand entrance hall in an unsettling quiet. I stood there, still stiff in my formal attire, the scent of expensive perfume and wilting flowers clinging to the air. The day had been an exhausting performance, a charade I was only too eager to conclude. Yet a new tension settled as Lyra, my new duchess, calmly began pulling off her pristine white silk gloves. Her movements were fluid, deliberate, utterly composed. Where I felt a profound weariness deep in my bones, she seemed to possess an unshakable poise, as if the long hours of public scrutiny had merely sharpened her edges. "That went well, don't you think?" Her voice, soft yet clear, cut through the quiet. It was a conversational tone, as if we were discussing the weather, but the words felt like a prelude to something far more significant. The vast, echoing hall seemed to amplify the unspoken undercurrent between us. My patience, already threadbare, snapped. "What did you do?" I demanded, my voice rougher than I intended. My gaze swept over her, taking in the exquisite gown, the elegant coiffure. "How is it that you look so different? And what precisely were your intentions today?" My words were blunt, accusing, born of a day spent in bewildered observation and a growing, unsettling dread. She simply tilted her head, those sharp green eyes now studying me with an unnerving intensity. It felt as though she saw not merely my features, but the turmoil churning beneath my carefully constructed facade. "I look different," Lyra replied, her voice calm and steady, "because you never truly looked at me before, Your Grace." Each word was a precise, calculated strike, delivered without malice, yet carrying the weight of an undeniable truth. I opened my mouth to protest, to form some defense against her quiet accusation, but no sound came. The grand staircase, a symbol of Blackwood power, loomed behind her, making her appear even taller, more formidable. "You saw what you expected to see," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "A plain, boring girl who would be grateful for your attention. A quiet mouse to be easily managed. You never bothered to look deeper, did you?" Her question hung in the air, a silent challenge. Shame, a feeling I rarely allowed myself to acknowledge, began to prickle at my skin. I remembered the casual dismissals, the cutting remarks I had made to my friends. Meek pawn, barn cat, church mouse. The words echoed in my mind, a damning testament to my own blindness. She hadn't changed. I had simply refused to see. My eyes, once clouded by pride and prejudice, were now forced open, and the reflection I saw in her gaze was not flattering. The truth of her words was a bitter pill, stripping away my carefully cultivated arrogance. I closed my mouth, the argument dying on my lips, defeated before it even began. "But the way you handled everyone today," I countered, my voice thick with frustration, refusing to fully concede. "The things you said. You made me look like a neglectful husband and a lazy nobleman." The accusation felt justified, the sting of public humiliation still fresh. I had endured a day of backhanded compliments and veiled slights, all orchestrated with a smile by the woman who now stood before me. Did I? Lyra's smile was as sharp as a blade, a glint of triumph in her green eyes. It was not a friendly smile, but one of keen intellect and quiet victory. Or did I merely tell the truth about your behavior and allow people to draw their own conclusions? Her logic was impeccable, infuriating in its simplicity. I opened my mouth again, desperate to argue, to find a flaw in her perfect, unsettling composure. She hadn't lied about anything. She had simply presented facts, my preference for physical activities over literature, my social obligations that kept me from honeymoon plans, in a way that twisted public perception to her advantage. The weight of her argument was heavy, pressing down on me, silencing my protests. The vast hall, once a symbol of my dominion, now felt like a cage, its walls closing in, reflecting only the echo of her unassailable truth. My frustration simmered, a bitter realization dawning that against her strategic mind, my usual bluster was utterly useless. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" I asked, the words barely a whisper, a chilling premonition settling in my gut. My gaze followed Lyra as she began to ascend the grand staircase, her silhouette framed against the vast, ornate architecture. Each step she took was a deliberate assertion of power, leaving me physically and symbolically beneath her. "Oh yes," Lyra affirmed, her voice drifting back to me, imbued with a sweetness that did little to mask its underlying menace. "I told you that you were about to get an education, my dear husband. Today was just your first lesson." She paused on the landing, turning to look back down at me. Her expression was unreadable, yet her eyes glinted with purpose. It was the gaze of a cat observing its prey, a silent promise of future maneuvers. "I should mention that I've already spoken with your mother about redecorating the master suite. She thinks it's a wonderful idea for us to make a fresh start together." My jaw tightened. "You can't just change my rooms without asking me." The indignation flared, a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of control over my own home, my own life. But the words sounded hollow, even to my own ears, against the backdrop of her calm authority. Her smile only widened, an unsettling curve of her lips that promised further shifts to my world. "Actually, I can," Lyra replied, her voice a gentle, melodic chime, yet it resonated with an undeniable force. "As your Duchess, I now have authority over all domestic arrangements in this house. It's traditional, you see, and your mother agrees completely." She offered a final, subtly triumphant smile before turning and disappearing into the shadowed corridor above, leaving me standing utterly alone in the cavernous hall. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with implications. In one single day, she had managed to charm my mother, subtly manipulate my guests, carefully damage my public reputation, and now with a polite smile and a mention of decorations, she had banished me from my own master bedroom. My mind reeled, piecing together the events of the day, the quiet conversations, the knowing glances. Lyra Blackwood was no meek pawn, She was a master strategist, moving pieces on a chessboard I hadn't even known existed. The echoing memory of her voice, so calm, so absolute, reverberated in the empty space. Tomorrow your real education begins. As I slowly climbed the stairs, not towards my opulent suite, but towards a lonely guest bedroom, a chilling dread settled. I was beginning to understand that I hadn't married a mouse at all. I had married a lioness, and she was just getting started. 2 weeks. It had been but 2 short weeks since the cathedral bells had pealed, yet Blackwood Manor was utterly unrecognizable. Every shadowed corner, every imposing hall, now hummed with a foreign vibrancy that made my stomach clench. New drapes of lighter silk adorned the windows, allowing streams of unfamiliar sunlight to spill across floors polished to a mirror-like sheen. The once somber gardens, a place I rarely frequented, now teemed with newly hired gardeners, their cheerful chatter a constant, jarring counterpoint to the quiet resentment I had cultivated. The staff, who had once treated me with a stiff, grudging respect born of fear, now practically worshipped Lyra. They bent their schedules and indeed their hearts to her will, moving through my ancestral home with a disconcerting ease, as if I were merely an inconvenient ghost haunting my own domain. I felt like an intruder, a stranger in my own life. The aroma of freshly baked bread and strong coffee usually offered a small solace, a familiar comfort in my mornings. But even breakfast now felt like a performance. I entered the breakfast room, the long oak table gleaming under the morning light, to find Lyra already seated, a delicate china cup held gracefully in her hands. Her voice, soft as a morning breeze, carried a melodic warmth I rarely heard directed at me. "Good morning, Mrs. Finch," she said genuinely to the head cook, a woman who had spent decades toiling in near silence. "The staff meal you prepared yesterday was excellent. Please make sure to order extra meat for next week. The footmen have been working so hard with the renovations." Mrs. Finch, her face usually a mask of weary deference, beamed with visible, almost childlike pride. "Thank you, Your Grace. It's such a pleasure to work for someone who notices these things." I sat down, feeling a familiar stiffness in my shoulders. Mr. Davies, the butler, who had served the Blackwood family for 20 years, approached my chair. "Your Grace," he said, his tone respectful yet cool, as he poured my coffee. But when he turned to Lyra, his entire demeanor shifted, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Your Grace, the new linens you ordered have arrived. Shall I have them placed in the blue guest room as you requested?" Lyra's smile was radiant, a genuine warmth that made the older man practically glow under her praise. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Davies. You're so efficient." The contrast was a stinging slap, a stark reminder of my growing isolation. The moment the servants bowed out, leaving us alone in the cavernous breakfast room, I set my coffee cup down with a sharp clink that echoed too loudly. "What is this about the blue guest room?" I demanded, my voice rougher than I intended. Lyra looked up from buttering her toast, her movements precise and unhurried. Her eyes, those unsettlingly sharp green eyes, met mine with an innocent calm. "Oh, didn't I mention?" she asked, as if discussing the weather. "The master bedroom renovations are taking longer than expected. I thought you'd be more comfortable in the blue room permanently. It has such a lovely view of the stables." My voice rose, a sharp edge of indignation piercing through my forced composure. "The stables? That room is practically in the servants' quarters." It was a direct attack on my comfort, my status, a blatant disregard for my position in my own home. My jaw tightened, my hands clenching under the table. "Well," Lyra continued, her tone still deceptively sweet, but her eyes now diamond-sharp, "it's where you seem most comfortable anyway, isn't it? You spend most of your time drinking with the grooms and stable hands these days." The accusation stung, a raw truth laid bare. My usual friends, Lord Ashworth, Sir Alistair, Lord Finch, had indeed begun to avoid me. The rumors of my father's debts, the whisperings of my own financial woes, had spread like wildfire through London society, and they had vanished like smoke. With my usual companions gone, and my own staff treating me like an outsider, I had indeed sought a strange solace in the stables. At least the horses did not judge me, did not look at me with either fear or the unsettling admiration they now reserve for my wife. Shame washed over me, a bitter taste in my mouth. My gaze fell to my plate, unable to meet her unwavering stare. Besides, Lyra added, taking a delicate sip of her tea, her composure utterly unbreakable, I need the master suite for my new responsibilities. I'm hosting a ladies' charity meeting next week, and then the book club the following Tuesday. Your mother suggested I start taking a more active role in society. My head snapped up, my disbelief warring with a creeping sense of betrayal. My mother suggested what? I stammered. The Dowager Duchess, my own mother, was supposed to be my last bastion of support, a reminder of the order Lyra was so systematically dismantling. Oh yes, we've become quite close, Lyra said, a faint, polite smile playing on her lips. She's been giving me wonderful advice about managing the household accounts. A phantom image of my mother beaming with approval at Lyra during the wedding breakfast flashed in my mind. Lyra had not just charmed the guests, she had allied herself with my own mother, cementing her power base even deeper into the very foundations of my family. I stared at her, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Speaking of which, Lyra continued, her gaze unwavering, I've discovered some interesting things about our finances. A chill, sharper than any autumn draft, ran down my spine. My heart hammered against my ribs with a sudden, alarming rhythm. What kind of things? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lyra reached for a leather folder that lay beside her plate, her movements unhurried, almost casual. Well, for instance, I had no idea that you owe Lord Devereux £15,000 from gambling debts, or that you've borrowed another £8,000 from Sir Edmund to cover your losses at the horse races. My breath hitched. How did you... I began, but the words died in my throat. These were secrets I had guarded fiercely, even from my father's lawyers, hoping to resolve them before they shattered my already precarious standing. But Lyra, with a quiet authority that belied her gentle demeanor, had unearthed them all. My face paled, the blood draining from my cheeks. The quiet click of the folder opening was like the sound of a trap snapping shut around me. He stared at me, his face a canvas of fear and disbelief. His "how did you" was a broken whisper, exposing the depth of his shock. I'm your wife now, darling, I said, my voice razor sharp, cutting through the silence. I have access to all the family financial records. I also discovered that the estate brings in barely enough income to cover the basic expenses. No wonder you needed my dowry so desperately. I opened the folder, pulling out several papers with the quiet authority of a general, revealing a battle plan. I've been thinking about how to handle this situation. The good news is that my £40,000 is more than enough to pay off all your debts and still leave us comfortable. Julian's chest heaved with a momentary, visible relief. Thank God. I was starting to worry that... He trailed off. However, I interrupted smoothly, I've decided not to pay them all at once. The relief died instantly in his eyes, replaced by dawning horror. What do you mean? He asked, his voice strained. I mean, I'm going to pay them strategically. A little here, a little there, just enough to keep your creditors happy, but not enough to free you completely. I tilted my head, studying his shocked expression with calm precision. This way, you'll stay dependent on my goodwill and my money. Julian looked like I had physically punched him, the breath knocked from his lungs. You can't do that. Those men will ruin me if I don't pay them back, he protested, desperation creeping into his voice. My smile remained, sweet as honey, though my eyes were crystal clear. Oh, I'll make sure they get paid eventually, as long as you behave yourself. Behave myself? I repeated, my voice dangerously low, a primal anger stirring beneath the surface of my humiliation. Lyra simply continued, counting off each point on her delicate fingers, slow and deliberate. No more mistresses, no more gambling, no more drinking yourself into a stupor every night. You're going to start acting like a proper duke instead of a spoiled child. Every word was a lash, every demand a chain binding me tighter. And if I refuse, I challenged, though the fight was already draining from me. Lyra shrugged elegantly, a subtle movement that spoke volumes of her confidence. Then I'll stop making payments altogether. Lord Devereux is particularly impatient about money, isn't he? I hear he has some very unpleasant friends who help him collect debts. The implication was clear, chilling. Not only would my reputation be irrevocably destroyed, but my physical safety could be jeopardized. I stared at my wife, finally understanding the full, terrifying scope of what she had done. She hadn't just married me for revenge. She had studied me, learned every weakness, every secret vulnerability, and now she was using them to control me completely, utterly. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" I said quietly, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. My world, once a fortress of privilege and unchecked desires, was crumbling around me. "I've had plenty of time to plan while you were out drinking with your friends," Lyra replied, her voice soft but utterly implacable. "The same friends who seem to have disappeared lately, by the way. Funny how quickly they vanished once word got out about your financial troubles." The truth of that statement hit me like a physical blow. Lord Ashworth, Sir Alistair, and the others had indeed stopped visiting once rumors about my debts began circulating. I was completely alone now, stripped bare of allies, left with no one but this woman who had become my jailer, my master. I ran my hands through my disheveled hair, the weight of my helplessness pressing down on me. My world had narrowed to this room, this woman, and the cold, hard reality of my utter dependence. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, usually a comfort, now felt like a bitter mockery in the oppressive silence of the breakfast room. My thoughts, a swirling tempest of dread and humiliation, were abruptly cleaved by Lyra's voice, calm as a placid lake, yet it sent a tremor through the very marrow of my bones. She reached for another paper, her movements deliberate, almost ritualistic, and a chilling premonition gripped me. I had just begun to grasp the full extent of her mastery over my life, my finances, my very freedom. What further chains could she forge? "There's one more thing, Julian," she began, her gaze lifting from the document to meet mine. There was no triumph in her emerald eyes, only a quiet, unsettling certainty that made my breath catch. "I'm pregnant." The words struck me like a bolt of lightning, searing through the fog of my despair. My coffee cup clattered against the porcelain, a harsh echo in the sudden vacuum of the room. Pregnant? The world tilted, the polished oak table seeming to heave beneath my hands. It was impossible, unthinkable. Our wedding night, a brief, awkward encounter born of duty and desperation, had been utterly devoid of intimacy, of connection. I had seen it as another hurdle to endure, a contractual obligation. Now it had birthed an undeniable living consequence. My mind reeled, grasping for purchase, in the sudden terrifying reality she had just laid before me. Lyra, my adversary, my jailer, now carried my child, the heir to Blackwood, my heir. The revelation was a complete game changer, binding us not just by contracts and debts, but by blood, forever. I could only stare, utterly bewildered, as she gently, almost protectively, placed a hand over her still flat stomach. My jaw hung slack, the single word, "What?" a strangled whisper that barely escaped my lips. Lyra's smile was sweet, dangerously so, as if she offered me a poisoned confection. It was a smile that promised both a curse and an inescapable destiny. "I'm with child," she repeated, her voice a soft, implacable current. "About 6 weeks along, according to the doctor. Isn't that wonderful news?" Wonderful. The word felt like a cruel jest. I had planned to establish separate bedrooms permanently, to avoid any real intimacy with her, to maintain the last vestiges of my shattered pride. But now... "But we haven't," I began, my voice thick with disbelief, a desperate plea for a different reality. My mind flashed back to our wedding night, the distant contact, the utter lack of warmth. How could this be? Lyra tilted her head. Her green eyes, though soft, held that diamond-sharp gleam I had come to both dread and respect. "Haven't what, darling? Shared a bed since our wedding night?" "That's true, but once was apparently enough." Her hand, a stark visual of her power, remained on her stomach. "The future heir to the Blackwood Duchy is already growing inside me." A child. The reality began to sink in, heavy and irreversible. A child meant forever. It meant my bloodline, my legacy. entwined with hers in a way no contract could ever truly define. Lyra stood, smoothing the fabric of her morning dress with a practiced, elegant hand, the gesture a quiet assertion of her unyielding composure. Yes, which means you're tied to me forever now, whether you like it or not. Her gaze was steady, unwavering. I suggest you start getting used to the idea of being a proper husband and father. Your heir deserves better than the man you've been. Her words were not a request, but a decree, each syllable a hammer blow to the remnants of my defiant will. I stared at the financial papers scattered before me, their grim figures now utterly overshadowed by this one overwhelming truth. Lyra had not merely secured my future, she had sealed it, bound it with the most sacred of promises. The implications of Lyra's pronouncements rippled through me, a chilling wave. Not only had she systematically dismantled my authority, seized control of my household, and leveraged my debts, but now with this child, she possessed the ultimate undeniable claim. My gaze fell to the financial papers, then back to her. Her eyes glinted with purpose, an unreadable depth that hinted at strategies far beyond my comprehension. She paused, her hand still resting on her stomach, a silent promise. "Oh, and Julian," she called back, her voice sweet, almost conversational, yet it carried the weight of an unspoken command. "I've invited your mother for dinner tonight. I thought she should hear the happy news from us personally." My stomach clenched, an involuntary groan suppressed deep within my throat. My mother. Of course. Lyra, ever the master strategist, understood the power of public perception, the sway of familial approval. This was not merely about sharing news. It was about orchestrating a flawless performance of marital harmony, cementing her position further within society and within my own family. My mother, who had already fallen under Lyra's charm, would undoubtedly beam with delight, completely unaware of the intricate web of control Lyra had woven around me. "Please try to look pleased when I tell her," Lyra added, her expression perfectly composed, a delicate, almost ethereal smile playing on her lips. "We wouldn't want her to think there are any problems in our marriage." It was a subtle yet potent instruction, a whispered threat. My public face, my very demeanor, was now hers to command. She wanted not just my compliance, but my performance, a convincing illusion for the world. With that, she turned and walked toward the door, leaving me alone in the breakfast room, the rich oak feeling colder than ever. I watched her go, a ghost in my own home, the weight of her words pressing down on me. My life was no longer my own. It belonged to Lyra, and now to the child growing within her. The door clicked shut, leaving me in the echoing silence of the breakfast room, the scent of morning tea and Lyra's calculated sweetness lingering in the air. I slumped back into my chair, the vastness of my defeat settling upon me. Every secret I had guarded, every weakness I thought hidden, lay exposed, laid bare across the financial papers Lyra had left on the table. She was not merely my wife, she was my master, and I, her unwilling subject, was utterly at her mercy. My life, once dictated by self-indulgence and pride, was now a meticulously planned campaign, and Lyra, the brilliant general, held every advantage. Yet as my gaze drifted from the damning figures to the image of Lyra's hand on her stomach, a strange, unexpected sensation stirred within me. It was not the terror I had grown accustomed to, nor the anger that had fueled my initial contempt. It was something softer, a faint flickering light in the pervasive darkness of my dread. A child, my child. The thought, once horrifying, now carried a peculiar weight, a fragile promise. This heir, this unexpected new life, was not merely another instrument of Lyra's control. It was something new, something untainted by my past mistakes, untarnished by the bitterness of our beginning. Could it be? Could this child, this unforeseen bond, offer a path not just to my forced redemption, but to something genuine? The hope was nascent, almost imperceptible, a tiny spark in the vast, cold emptiness of my soul. It was a terrifying thought, for hope was a dangerous thing in my world. But it was there, a quiet whisper in the desolate chambers of my heart, suggesting a future that might transcend Lyra's meticulously crafted plan. Perhaps, just perhaps, this child might be the catalyst for a transformation I had never imagined possible. A true turning point in the silent war that raged between us. 3 months into this forced union, Blackwood Manor had become a labyrinth of echoes for me, each corridor whispering of a life I no longer controlled. I wandered its dim halls like a specter, a ghost in my own home. My attempts to reassert my authority had failed with a quiet, devastating finality. I would issue commands to the footmen, expecting the swift, fearful obedience I once commanded, only to find them glancing towards Lyra's study, their movements deferential to her unspoken will. When I tried to access the estate's private ledgers, hoping to pay off a burgeoning debt to Lord Ashworth, I discovered the funds had been seamlessly rerouted, now requiring both our signatures. My fury had sparked a desperate fire in a cold hearth, and I had threatened divorce, believing such a scandalous pronouncement would surely break her composure. Instead, Lyra had merely lifted a brow, a soft, confident laugh escaping her lips, a sound that chilled me more than any scream. "Go ahead, Julian," she had said, her voice like silk over steel. "But remember, I'm carrying your heir. Any divorce would be scandalous, and you'd lose access to my money entirely. Your creditors would destroy you within a month." The logic was undeniable, brutal in its simplicity. I was trapped, utterly powerless, a mere shadow in the grand tapestry she was weaving. The grand ballrooms of London, once my domain, now felt like stages where I was merely an unwelcome understudy. I had stopped drinking so heavily not out of choice, but because the brandy no longer offered solace, only a hollow ache. The laughter that once surrounded me had faded, replaced by the phantom whispers of society. My former companions, Lord Ashworth, Sir Alistair, Lord Finch, had vanished like mists at dawn, their loyalty proving as fragile as glass. Once they had sought my company, eager for my influence and fortune. Now, with rumors of my mounting debts and my wife's subtle dominance circulating like a fever, they avoided me entirely. I was the tame duke, the fool who had married a shrew, and the whispers followed me from drawing room to quiet garden path. Each murmured phrase, each averted gaze was a fresh wound to my pride. The loneliness that settled upon me was a heavy shroud, far more suffocating than any physical restraint. I was adrift, cut off from my past, with no clear path to any future I recognized. While my world crumbled, Lyra bloomed. It was a cruel, beautiful irony I was forced to witness daily. She moved through Blackwood Manor and London society with an effortless grace, her presence radiating a quiet power. She hosted charity events that raised thousands for orphanages, her gentle persuasion securing donations from the most hardened benefactors. Ladies of the ton sought her counsel, eager for her advice on household management and social decorum, praising her intelligence and poise. I would observe her from the periphery of a crowded room, watching her engage in animated conversations about social reforms with members of Parliament, her insights sharp and articulate. She was adored, praised, and admired, a radiant star in the firmament, where I was now merely a forgotten, flickering candle. The resentment simmered within me, a bitter brew, yet beneath it, a strange, undeniable admiration began to take root. She was everything I had dismissed, everything I had underestimated, and her triumph was a constant, stinging reminder of my own irrelevance. I stood in the doorway of the morning room, a silent sentinel, watching Dr. Albright conclude his examination of Lyra. She was 4 months along now, her pregnancy just beginning to show a gentle curve beneath her elegant gown. "Your Grace looks tired," Dr. Albright observed, his voice tinged with professional concern. Lyra merely smiled, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. "I feel wonderful, actually, Doctor," she replied, her voice clear and strong, resonating with a vibrant health that seemed almost defiant. Strong and healthy. My gaze lingered on her hand, then on the nascent life within, my air, my blood. Yet I felt no discernible connection to it, only a deepening sense of dread. The child was another chain, another unbreakable bond forged by Lyra's will. I was merely the vessel, the necessary inconvenience for her grand design. Dr. Albright, oblivious to the silent war raging within me, packed his bag with a contented sigh. He saw a healthy mother and a thriving child, I saw the tangible proof of my utter defeat, a future inextricably bound to the woman who had become my master. The world outside my window dissolved into a furious blur of autumn rain, each drop a percussive beat against the glass, mirroring the violent throbbing within my skull. My guest bedroom, once merely a temporary banishment, now felt like a prison, its shadows deepening with the encroaching evening. I tossed on the sweat-soaked sheets, the fever a malevolent spirit twisting my thoughts, pulling long-buried memories from the dark corners of my mind. My father's cruel words, sharp as shards of glass, echoed in the fevered silence. Weak, useless, a disappointment to the Blackwood name. I mumbled incoherent apologies to a phantom figure, then curses, caught in a swirling vortex of guilt and failure. This sickness was not just of the body. It was the culmination of 3 months of utter defeat, a punishment I felt I deserved. I awoke to a new kind of darkness, softer than the fevered night, yet just as disorienting. A dim, flickering candlelight painted the room in sepia tones, and a presence stirred beside my bed. For a moment I feared it was another fever dream, a cruel jap of my tormented mind. But then she leaned closer, and Lyra's face, etched in the gentle glow, brought a fragile hope that stole my breath. Her eyes, usually so sharp, held a soft concern I hadn't seen directed at me in what felt like an eternity. A cool, gentle hand pressed against my burning forehead, sending a wave of relief through my aching bones. "You're awake," she whispered, her voice a balm to my raw throat. "The fever's finally breaking." I tried to speak, but only a hoarse sound escaped. "Lyra," I managed, the sound a question, a plea, a fragment of my broken self reaching out. "What are you doing here?" My voice was still a strained whisper, but the question hung heavy in the dimly lit room. My mind, though clearer, still grappled with the surreal sight of her, my determined wife, tending to me in this lonely room. She said simply, "Taking care of you. You've been very sick." I tried to push myself up, a desperate need for answers overriding my weakness. But her hand, though gentle, was firm, pressing me back against the pillows. "But why?" The word was laced with confusion and a raw, emotional exhaustion I hadn't known I carried. "You hate me. Why have you been punishing me?" A flicker, something like a fleeting shadow of pain, crossed Lyra's face in the candlelight. She was quiet for a long moment, continuing to bathe my face with the cool cloth, the soft lapping of water in the basin, the only sound. "Because you needed to understand," she finally said, her voice quiet, impactful. "You needed to know what it felt like to be powerless, to be dismissed and controlled by someone who saw you as less than human." "I never saw you as less than human," I protested weakly, my voice thick with a shame that was rapidly eclipsing the fever. "Didn't you?" Lyra's voice was sad, devoid of anger, as she continued to gently cleanse my brow. "You called me plain as old bread. You planned to parade your mistresses in front of me. You were going to humiliate me at every opportunity just because you could." She paused, her hands stilling on my forehead. "How is that different from seeing me as less than human, Julian?" Her words were a mirror, reflecting the ugly truth of my past actions, and I closed my eyes, the shame a burning tide. In my delirium, old wounds had reopened, revealing the constant criticism, the mocking, the belittling I endured as a child. "My father," I whispered, the name tasting of ash. "He used to say terrible things to me, called me weak, useless, said I was a disappointment to the Blackwood name." Lyra's soft voice broke through my reverie, a quiet acknowledgement. "I know. Your mother told me about his cruelty during one of our visits. I swore I would never let anyone make me feel that powerless again." I continued, my voice breaking, the tears I hadn't known I was holding back finally spilling onto my temples. "But instead, I became just like him. I was going to do to you what he did to me." Lyra's hand, so recently a vessel of cool water, now moved to stroke my hair. It was a gesture so tender, so unexpected, that it made my chest ache with a pain that was not of the body, but of the soul. "The difference is," she said softly, her touch a comfort, "you can still choose to change. Your father never could." Despair, a familiar companion, threatened to engulf me again. How can I change? I asked, a desperate edge to my voice. You control everything now. The servants despise me. Society sees me as a joke. I have nothing left. Lyra's hand rested gently on her slightly rounded belly, a silent testament to the life growing within. You have me, she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet firm with conviction. And you have our child. But you don't want me, I said, fresh tears sliding down my cheeks, blurring her soft features in the candlelight. Not really, this is all just revenge. Lyra sighed, a soft, weary sound as she set down the cloth and folded her hands over her belly. My heart pounded, a strange mixture of fear and a desperate, fragile hope. Do you want to know a secret, Julian? She asked, her green eyes, usually so sharp, now soft and wistful. The reason your cruel words hurt me so badly wasn't just because they were mean. It was because I had been falling in love with you. My eyes flew open, the shock jolting through my weakened body. What? I gasped, the single word loaded with disbelief. Before I overheard you that day, she continued, her gaze unwavering, I had been watching you, not the arrogant duke everyone else saw, but the man underneath. I saw how gentle you were with the stable cats. I noticed that you always remembered the servants' children's names. I watched you reading poetry in the garden when you thought no one was looking. Her voice grew softer, laced with a quiet ache. I thought maybe, just maybe, there was hope for us to build something real together. But then I ruined it, I said miserably, the full weight of my cruelty crashing down upon me. You broke my heart, Lyra admitted, her voice a ghost of its former wistfulness. And I decided that if you were going to be cruel, I would show you what real power looked like. I would teach you what it meant to be on the receiving end of someone else's control. She looked down at me. Her green eyes, still soft in the candlelight, held no judgment, only a sad understanding. And now, she continued, now I see that you're not your father. You're capable of growth, of remorse. You've stopped drinking so much. You've started reading again. You even helped Mrs. Finch's grandson find work in the stables last week, though you thought no one noticed. My breath caught. I had helped the boy, a quiet act I thought no one would ever know. You saw that? I asked, a genuine surprise in my voice. I see everything that happens in this house, Lyra said with a small, knowing smile that was no longer sharp but gentle, including the fact that you've been trying to change, even when you thought it was hopeless. A comfortable silence settled between us then, broken only by the persistent autumn rain against the windows and the soft crackling of the fire in the hearth. It was a silence filled not with tension, but with a fragile, dawning understanding. Finally, I reached out tentatively, my hand trembling slightly, and covered hers where it rested on the quilt. Can you forgive me? I asked, my voice raw with emotion. For what I said, for what I planned to do to you. Lyra's fingers squeezed mine gently, a silent reassurance. I already have, she said, her voice soft but firm. The question is, can you forgive yourself? Before I could even begin to comprehend the depth of that question, before I could answer, Lyra suddenly gasped, her hands flying to her stomach, and she doubled over, her face paling rapidly. The fragile peace shattered, replaced by an urgent, icy wave of panic. Our. The low, comforting hum of Lyra's breathing beside me was suddenly violently shattered. A sharp gasp tore from her throat, jolting me from the hazy peace of my fever-broken slumber. My eyes, heavy and slow, struggled to focus in the dim candlelight. Lyra was doubled over, her hands flying to her stomach, her face a mask of pale agony. The baby, she whispered, her voice a thin, ragged thread. Something's wrong with the baby. Panic, cold and raw, sliced through the remnants of my illness. I struggled to sit up, but my body felt heavy, traitorous, still bound by the lingering weakness of the fever. Terror, sharp and immediate, eclipsed everything else. Joy for une fois. The quiet calm of the manor exploded into a maelstrom. Servants, roused from their beds, hurried through the halls like blurring shadows, their hushed whispers carrying a frantic urgency. Dr. Albright, summoned from his sleep, raced past my door, his satchel thudding against his side. I pushed myself from the bed, my legs trembling beneath me, and stumbled into the hallway. The world spun, but I gripped the cold marble wall, forcing myself to stand. Lyra's cries, sharp and desperate, echoed from her room, each sound a knife twisting in my gut. My chest heaved, a frantic drum against my ribs. No, not now. Not when. I pressed my forehead against the heavy oak door, my raw voice a silent plea, a prayer I hadn't uttered since childhood. Please don't take them from me. I'll do anything. Be anything you want. Just please let them both live. The words were an honest confession, a desperate surrender of my old self, a true measure of the man I was desperately trying to become. Julian 1:15. 18 hours. A lifetime lived in the span of a night and a day. Each passing moment was a fresh descent into a hell I could not escape. Lyra's cries, at times soft whimpers, at others sharp, soul-searing screams, tore through the thick oak of her door and through the very fabric of my being. My voice was raw from hours of pacing, from the incessant, silent prayers that hammered against my mind. Dawn broke, painting the eastern sky in bruised purples and grays, but within the manor the darkness of uncertainty only deepened. Dr. Albright emerged periodically, his face etched with grim lines, his words clipped and dire. The baby is coming too early. Complications are severe. Both mother and child are in grave danger. Each update struck me like a physical blow, leaving me slumped against the cold hallway wall, too exhausted to move, too terrified to rest. Chapter 150. My mother, the Dowager Duchess Eleanor, found me there as the first timid rays of sunlight pierced the stained glass window at the end of the hall. She was a woman of rigid propriety, yet she sat beside me on the cold marble floor, her silk gown rustling softly, her presence a balm. "Your Grace, you need to rest," she murmured, her voice laced with concern. "You're still recovering from your own illness." I shook my head, my throat raw. "I can't leave. What if something happens? What if she needs me?" She reached out, her hand resting gently on my arm. "Tell me about your wife, Julian. Not the Duchess everyone sees, but the woman you married." Through exhausted, tear-filled eyes, I looked at her, my heart spilling open. "She's remarkable, Mother. Brilliant and strong and brave. She sees things I never noticed, the servants' struggles, ways to help people, solutions to problems I didn't even know existed." My voice broke, and I was going to destroy her. I was going to break her spirit just to prove I had power over her. My mother's gaze was soft. "But you didn't." "Only because she was stronger than I was. She fought back when I expected her to crumble. She turned my own cruelty against me and taught me what it felt like to be powerless." I ran my hands through my disheveled hair, the shame a bitter taste. I deserved everything she did to me, but she didn't deserve what I planned to do to her. And now I love her, I whispered, the words feeling strange, yet utterly true on my lips. I love her courage, her intelligence, the way she makes everyone around her better just by being herself. I love how she protected herself when I tried to hurt her. I even love how she made me face my own failings. Tears streamed freely down my cheeks. And I might lose her before I ever get the chance to tell her. 2:55. Another scream, sharper, more agonizing than the last, tore from Lyra's room. It ripped through my heart, jolting me to my feet. I hammered on the door, propriety utterly forgotten. "Let me in," I called to Dr. Albright, my voice hoarse, desperate. "Please, I need to see her." The doctor's strained voice answered from within. "Your Grace, childbirth is no place for a husband." "I don't care about propriety," I roared back, my voice shaking with a fierce resolve I hadn't known I possessed. "She's my wife, and she shouldn't face this alone." A long, tense pause stretched between us, punctuated only by Lyra's ragged breaths. Then the sound of hurried footsteps, and the door creaked open. Dr. Albright stood there, his face grave, his sleeves rolled up, revealing sweat on his brow. He looked at me, his eyes weary but understanding. "Very well, but stay out of the way, Your Grace, and prepare yourself. This is not going well." I pushed past him, my gaze fixed on Lyra, my world narrowing to her alone. 3:30. The bedroom was a battlefield, not of steel, but of pain and quiet desperation. Lyra lay pale and exhausted on sweat-soaked sheets, her chestnut hair plastered to her forehead, her breathing shallow and ragged. Two midwives worked frantically around her, their faces grim, while Mrs. Finch, the head cook, held cool cloths to Lyra's brow, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. When Lyra saw me, her eyes, once blazing with defiance, now filled with tears of despair. "I'm sorry," she gasped between contractions, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm losing the baby. I'm failing you." I rushed to her side, not caring about the midwives' shocked glances, and took her trembling hand. It was cold, frail. "You're not failing anyone," I said firmly, squeezing her fingers, trying to pour all my strength into her. "You're the strongest person I know, Lyra. You can do this." Dr. Albright approached, his expression grim. "The baby's too small, Your Grace, and Her Grace has lost a lot of blood. I'm not sure either of them will survive this." My jaw clenched. "No," I said, my voice low and steady, laced with an unwavering resolve. "You save them both. Whatever it takes, Doctor, you save my wife and my child." 4:15. For the next 6 hours I stayed by Lyra's side, a silent vigil against the encroaching darkness. I held her hand, wiping the sweat from her brow, whispering words of encouragement, prayers, and confessions during her brief moments of respite. I told her about my childhood fears, the gnawing insecurity under my arrogant facade, how my father's cruelty had shaped me, making me lash out, desperate to feel powerful. I spoke of my profound regrets, how I had wasted so much time, so much potential in self-pity and careless abandon. I confessed every cruel thought I had ever harbored about her, every dismissive word, and begged her forgiveness, not just with my lips, but with every fiber of my being. Most importantly, I told her, over and over again, that I loved her. "I love your brilliant mind," I whispered, as she gripped my hand during another agonizing contraction. "I love how you see solutions where others only see problems. I love how you made our servants feel valued and respected." "Julian," she gasped, her voice fading. "If I don't survive this, you will," I interrupted fiercely, my voice raw with emotion. "You have to. I just found you, Lyra. I just figured out who I want to be because of you. You can't leave me now." Her eyes, though clouded with pain, found mine. "But if I don't, promise me you'll be a good father to our child. Promise me you'll be the man I saw glimpses of, not the man you were trained to be." "I promise," I said, bringing her hand to my lips, tears blurring my vision. "But you're going to be here to make sure I keep that promise. You're going to raise our child with me, Lyra, and teach them to be as strong and kind as you are." Utter 5:10. As afternoon faded to evening, Lyra's strength began to wane alarmingly. Her contractions grew weaker, her eyes fluttering, drifting in and out of consciousness. Dr. Albright pulled me aside, his face etched with a gravity that turned my blood to ice. "Your Grace," he began, his voice compassionate but clinical, "I need to be honest with you. The Duchess is losing too much blood, and the baby is in distress. I may have to choose between saving your wife or saving your child." The world tilted around me, the floor beneath my feet dissolving into an abyss. My mind reeled, grasping for purchase, but found none. "What do you mean, choose?" I choked out, my voice a strangled whisper. "If I try to save the baby, Your Grace, your wife will almost certainly die. If I focus solely on saving her, the baby will not survive." Dr. Albright explained, his gaze unwavering, full of profound sorrow. "As her husband, the decision is yours." The weight of that choice, the crushing, impossible burden, nearly brought me to my knees. My heir, the future of the Caldwell line, or the woman who, through fire and defiance, had become the very center of my world, the one who had finally shown me how to truly live. A month ago, the decision would have been brutally simple. The heir mattered more than the woman. But now, looking at Lyra's pale, beloved face, I knew there was no choice at all. Sur sex. My decision was not a struggle, not a moment of hesitation. It was an instant, raw truth that sprang from the deepest, most transformed part of my soul. Save my wife, I commanded, my voice firm, unwavering. Save Lyra. Dr. Albright nodded grimly, his acceptance heavy with unspoken understanding. Very well, Your Grace, but you should say goodbye to your child. As he turned to prepare for the procedure, I knelt beside the bed, taking Lyra's hand in mine. Her eyes fluttered open, barely conscious, but she squeezed my fingers weakly. I love you, I whispered in her ear, my voice thick with emotion. I love you more than titles or heirs or anything else in this world. I choose you, Lyra. I will always choose you. A single tear slipped down her pale cheek, a shimmering testament to the love we had found. I love you too, she breathed, her voice faint. I'm sorry I made you suffer. I was so angry, so hurt. I kissed her forehead gently, my heart aching with both sorrow and profound gratitude. You had every right to be angry. I was cruel and selfish, and I didn't deserve your kindness. But somehow, Lyra, you made me into a man worthy of your love. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. The baby, she whispered, a flicker of pain crossing her face. We'll be fine, I lied gently, not wanting her to carry that burden. Not now. Just rest now. Let me take care of you for once. My eyes burned, but my resolve was solid. I had chosen, and I would face the consequences, whatever they may be. I knelt beside her, the world narrowing to Lyra's pale face, her hand a fragile anchor in mine. Dr. Albright stood poised, a grim shadow in the flickering candlelight, preparing for the impossible choice. My heart shattered into a million pieces, yet a strange, powerful calm settled over me. There was no longer any indecision. I love you, I whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to her damp forehead, tasting the salt of her tears, the faint scent of lavender that clung to her skin. I love you more than titles, more than heirs, more than anything else in this world. I choose you, Lyra. I will always choose you. A single tear, bright as a diamond, escaped her closed eye and traced a path down her temple. Her fingers, though weak, squeezed mine. I love you too, she breathed, her voice a fragile wisp. I'm sorry I made you suffer. I was so angry, so hurt. My throat tightened. You had every right to be angry, I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. I was cruel and selfish, and I didn't deserve your kindness. I kissed her forehead again, a silent prayer against her skin. But somehow, my love, you made me into a man worthy of your love. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. She stirred, a faint whisper. The baby. We'll be fine, I lied gently, a desperate hope fluttering within my chest, unwilling for her to carry that unbearable weight. Just rest now. Let me take care of you for once. It was a promise I had never truly meant to keep until this moment. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with the unspoken, the inevitable. Dr. Albright, his face etched with somber determination, leaned over Lyra. I watched his hands, steady and precise, as he prepared for the procedure that would save my wife, but cost us our child. My entire being was a raw wound, yet my resolve remained unshaken. This was my penance, my ultimate act of love. Just as the sterile instruments clinked softly, just as my breath hitched in my chest, a tremor ran through Lyra. Her body, spent and fragile, gathered an impossible primal strength. She gave one final, tremendous push, a guttural cry tearing from her throat that mingled with a sudden impossible sound, a tiny angry wail. It cut through the silence like a bolt of lightning, sharp and undeniable. Dr. Albright froze, then his head snapped up, his eyes wide with a miracle. It's a boy, he shouted, his voice hoarse with amazement. A son! The midwives, who had slumped in quiet despair, sprang into frantic, joyful action. The room, moments before a tableau of impending loss, now pulsed with frenetic energy. They cleaned and wrapped the incredibly small infant, a fragile bundle of life, while Dr. Albright, with renewed urgency, worked to stop Lyra's bleeding. For several terrifying minutes, the fear still clawed at me. The thought of losing her, even as our son cried his protest to the world. But slowly, gradually, the ashen pallor began to recede from Lyra's face, replaced by a faint, precious color. The miracle had truly begun. They placed him, a tiny, squalling bundle, into my arms, and a gasp escaped me, a sound of pure, unadulterated wonder. He was impossibly small, a whisper of a being, yet his lungs were strong, filling the room with his indignant cries. His eyes, though unfocused, seemed bright and alert, already possessing a fierce spirit. Julian, still kneeling by my side, leaned closer, his own face etched with a love that felt utterly new, utterly overwhelming. He touched our son's impossibly small hand, his large finger dwarfing the baby's. "He's perfect," Julian whispered, his voice thick with emotion, tears now openly streaming down his face, mirroring my own. Our son's tiny fingers immediately wrapped around Julian's with surprising strength, a miniature grip that belied his size. "He's a fighter, just like his mother," Julian added, his gaze meeting mine. And in his eyes I saw not just love, but a profound, reverent admiration. In that moment, holding our son, feeling Julian's gentle touch, the pain of the last hours, the torment of the past months, faded to a distant echo. All that remained was this tender wonder, this profound love, this shared, precious joy. Julian reached out, his hand gently stroking my damp hair away from my face. I looked up at him, still cradling our son, a question forming on my lips that felt both vital and fragile. "You stayed with me through all of that," I whispered, the exhaustion finally pulling at the edges of my consciousness, but the wonder in my heart was boundless. "Why?" His gaze was steady, unwavering, filled with a depth I had once thought him incapable of. "Where else would I be, Lyra?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion, yet firm with conviction. "You're my wife, my partner, my equal. We face everything together from now on." His words, once a contract, now felt like a sacred vow. He wasn't simply declaring his presence, he was redefining our entire existence. My gaze drifted from his face to our son, nestled in my arms, then back to Julian. This man, the Duke who had once dismissed me as a barn cat, now declared me his equal. The journey had been arduous, fraught with pain and strategic battles. But here, in the quiet aftermath of a miracle, a new truth bloomed between us. This was not a forced union, but a chosen partnership, forged in the crucible of his illness and our child's perilous arrival. I leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to Lyra's brow, then to our son's soft, downy head. The scent of new life, mingled with Lyra's own familiar aroma, filled me with a profound sense of peace. "Even after everything I put you through," Lyra murmured, her voice soft, laden with the weight of our shared past, "the way I controlled you and manipulated you." I considered her words, the honest truth of them. "You taught me what it felt like to be powerless." "Yes," I acknowledged, my voice quiet, reflective. The sting of those lessons had been sharp, but the clarity they brought was a gift. "But you also showed me what real strength looks like. You could have destroyed me completely, Lyra, but instead, you gave me chances to change. You protected yourself without becoming cruel like I was." I leaned closer, my heart overflowing. "Besides, my love, I deserved every bit of it. You were fighting for your dignity and your future. I was just fighting to maintain a power I hadn't earned, a power built on arrogance and fear." The truth of it settled deep within me, a profound, humbling realization. My transformation wasn't a punishment completed, but a lesson learned, a new path chosen. Lyra shifted our son to a more comfortable position. Her eyes, still weary but bright with a dawning hope, met mine. "So, what happens now?" she asked, her voice a quiet whisper in the room. I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached my eyes, a feeling I hadn't known in months. "Now we start over," I said simply, the words feeling right, true. As equals, as partners, as people who choose to love each other instead of people forced together by contract. I gazed down at our son, Elias, his tiny face screwed up in a moment of sleepy contentment. "And we teach this little fighter that strength comes from protecting others, not from dominating them. That true power lies in kindness, in respect, in nurturing the world around us." It was a vow not just to her, but to him, to the future we would build. The foundations of our home, once built on cold tradition and transactional arrangements, would now be laid brick by brick with mutual admiration, shared dreams, and the unwavering conviction that love was a choice, renewed each day. Dr. Albright, his face etched with fatigue but alight with relieved smile, approached the bed. He carried a small, clean bundle and placed it gently in Lyra's arms once more. "Your Grace, both mother and baby are going to be fine," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of the last 20 hours. "The child is small but healthy, and the Duchess is stronger than she looks." A wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over me, so potent it made my knees weak. I let out a genuine laugh, the first I'd felt in months, a sound that echoed joyously in the quiet room. "I could have told you that, Doctor," I said, my voice still raw, but laced with triumph and an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "She's the strongest person I've ever met." Lyra, holding our son close, met my gaze, a soft, knowing smile gracing her lips. The ordeal was truly over. We had faced the abyss, chosen love over all else, and emerged miraculously with both our futures in our arms. As the medical team cleaned up, their hushed movements a balm to the strained quiet, and the household settled into the slow, gentle rhythms of recovery, I found myself in Lyra's bedroom. She had drifted off to sleep, our tiny son Elias cradled peacefully in her arms, a perfect picture of fragile strength in the soft candlelight. I settled into the chair beside her bed, my eyes tracing the curve of her cheek, the rise and fall of her chest, the miniature hand of our son resting on her breast. My life, once a predictable, barren landscape of duty and self-indulgence, had transformed completely. 6 months ago, I had been a cruel, selfish man, viewing marriage as a burden and women as objects to be controlled. Now I was a husband who had found his equal, a father who understood that his most important job was not to rule, but to protect and nurture. I knew now that real power came not from inspiring fear, but from earning respect and love. "Thank you," I whispered to Lyra, though she slept soundly. "For what?" she murmured without opening her eyes, her voice soft as a sigh. "For not giving up on me," I continued, my own voice thick with emotion. "For seeing something worth saving underneath all my cruelty. For teaching me what love actually means." I intended to keep watch over my family through the night, a silent vigil of gratitude and devotion. I opened my eyes slowly, the soft candlelight a gentle halo around Julian's earnest face. The depth of his gratitude, the raw vulnerability in his eyes was a revelation. He was truly changed. "You taught me something too," I murmured, my voice still weak, but filled with a quiet certainty. He leaned closer, his gaze expectant. "What's that?" "That even the cruelest hearts can learn to be kind," I replied, a soft smile touching my lips. "That change is possible if someone is brave enough to face their own failings." I reached for his hand, my fingers intertwining with his, a bond forged in fire. "You chose me over your heir, Julian. You chose love over duty." I looked at him then, truly looked, and saw not the arrogant duke I had once despised, nor the broken man I had nursed, but the noble soul he had become. That's when I knew you had truly changed. Our unique story, born of betrayal and pain, had blossomed into something sacred, something personal, a testament to the enduring power of redemption and the transformative whisper of destiny. 6 months. 6 months had passed since Lyra became my Duchess, since Elias entered our world, since the very foundations of Blackwood Manor, and indeed my own soul, were irrevocably shifted. I walked through the grand halls now, not as a lonely duke haunted by shadows, but as a man awakened, forever changed by the woman who had dared to see beyond my cruelty. Where silence once reigned, broken only by the distant tick of a clock or my own bitter mutterings. Now the air hummed with life. Sunlight, once a reluctant visitor, streamed through newly cleaned windows, illuminating the intricate carvings of the ceilings and banishing the perpetual gloom. The heavy dark drapes of my father's era had been replaced by lighter silks that billowed softly with every breeze, carrying the faint, sweet scent of the rose gardens Lyra had painstakingly revived. But more than the physical transformation, it was the sound that defined our home now. The ceaseless, bubbling laughter of baby Elias. It was a melody that stitched together the broken pieces of my past, echoing through spaces that had known only resentment and cold duty. He was the sun Lyra had brought into our once dim world. I often found myself pausing, leaning against a freshly polished mahogany doorframe, simply to listen to his innocent joy. Lyra, my lioness, moved through these transformed rooms with an effortless grace that spoke of ownership, not just of the estate, but of her own destiny, and dare I say, of my heart. We work side by side now, a concept once unimaginable. Our shared purpose, born from conflict, had blossomed into a harmonious rhythm, like two instruments finally finding their perfect key. Rebuilding the estate, nurturing our marriage, raising our son. It was all a symphony Lyra had composed, and I, once a discordant note, now played my part with profound gratitude. My study, once a fortress against the world, a refuge for my self-pity and my vices, had been reborn. The heavy, intimidating desk where my father had signed away my future, and where I had so carelessly plotted Lyra's humiliation, now felt lighter, almost welcoming. It was a space shared with Lyra, a place where our minds met, not in battle, but in collaboration. The scent of old leather and brandy had faded, replaced by the crisp, clean smell of fresh parchment and Lyra's subtle floral perfume. I would sit opposite her, our heads bent over ledgers, discussing crop yields and tenant petitions, a quiet contentment settling over me that I had never known in my former reckless life. My father had managed the estate through fear and rigid tradition, viewing tenants as mere cogs in a machine. I, in my arrogance, had paid them even less mind. But Lyra, with her compassionate heart and incisive mind, had shown me a different way. She spoke of listening, of understanding their struggles, of investing in their well-being. Her advice, once a veiled command, was now a trusted counsel, a guiding light. I found myself adopting her methods, visiting the farms, speaking with the families, remembering their children's names. The gratitude in their eyes, the genuine respect they offered, was a far more potent reward than any fleeting pleasure my old life had afforded me. It was a silent testament to Lyra's unwavering belief that even the cruelest hearts could learn to be kind, that a duke could be a steward, not just a ruler. My old patterns, those inherited shackles of indifference and dominance, were slowly, painstakingly breaking. It was a quiet, profound satisfaction, knowing that the legacy I built with Lyra would be one of genuine care, not callous control. Our love, a phoenix risen from the ashes of conflict, was now something deeper, more genuine than any story told in whispered ballrooms. I often found myself reflecting on those raw, painful beginnings, the sharp sting of Lyra's defiance, the bitter taste of my own humiliation. It had been a crucible, a trial by fire that had burned away the dross of my pride and entitlement, leaving behind something precious and resilient. I had never believed in such a love, certainly not for a man like me, nor born from such a venomous start. Yet here it was, an unexpected joy that settled deep in my bones, a quiet, unwavering warmth in the heart of our home. In the quiet moments, when Elias was asleep and the manor settled into the gentle hum of evening, Lyra and I would often sit by the drawing room fire, her hand clasped in mine. Sometimes we spoke, sometimes we simply existed in a shared silence, our gazes meeting across the flickering flames, a universe of understanding passing between us. We had seen each other at our absolute worst, stripped bare of pretense and societal masks, and still, we had chosen to love. This was not the fleeting passion of a love match, nor the cold duty of an arranged one. It was a profound, conscious choice renewed each day. It was a testament to forgiveness, to the sacred power of second chances, and to the strength found in vulnerability. Our love was not a fairy tale, but a truth forged in hardship, a sturdy, enduring oak that had weathered the storm. For a fleeting moment, I felt a shadow pass over the warmth, a whisper of the world beyond our sanctuary, reminding me that even the strongest oaks must face new winds. The crisp October morning light, usually a gentle balm upon the polished mahogany of my study, felt strangely sharp. My gaze, typically fixed on the orderly columns of account books alongside Lyra, snapped upward at Mr. Davies's troubled voice. "Your Grace," our butler announced, his usually composed features slightly furrowed. "Lady Seraphina Thorne is here to see you. She insists it is urgent." My hand, which had been resting over Lyra's on the ledger, tightened almost imperceptibly. Seraphina. The name itself was a ghost from a life I had thought long buried. I remembered the calculating glint in her eyes even then, a glint I now sensed held something far more troubling. I felt Lyra's fingers gently squeeze mine, a silent anchor in the sudden unease. My initial instinct, born of a desire to shield our hard-won peace, was to dismiss her. "Tell her I am not receiving visitors," I stated firmly, my voice cool. "My wife and I are quite busy with estate business." But Lyra's touch held a different counsel. Her green eyes, clear and unwavering, met mine. "We should see what she wants, Julian," she said, her voice a calm whisper that resonated with unspoken strength. "Whatever it is, we will face it together." The simple truth of her words, the unwavering faith in our partnership, settled a tremor in my soul. There was no going back to the man who faced threats alone. Lady Seraphina Thorne swept into the study like a storm cloud given form, her expensive blue gown a vibrant slash against the muted tones of the room. Her dark hair was arranged in an elaborate cascade, a meticulous facade that couldn't quite mask the hard, desperate glint in her eyes. "Julian, darling," she purred, her voice dripping with an intimacy that grated against my skin. She completely ignored Lyra, who stood silently beside me, her composure as unyielding as marble. "You look well. Marriage obviously agrees with you." My jaw tightened. "Lady Seraphina," I replied, my tone deliberately cool, "what brings you here?" I stood firm, not moving an inch from Lyra's side, a silent declaration of where my loyalty lay. My heart, which had just found its steady rhythm in our newfound peace, stopped. Lady Seraphina's smile sharpened, a predatory glint entering her eyes. "I think you know," she said, her gaze flicking meaningfully to me, then back to Julian. With a dramatic flourish, she placed a hand over her stomach, which I now noticed was indeed subtly rounded beneath the fashionable cut of her gown. My breath hitched. "I'm carrying your child." The words struck the silent study like a physical blow, echoing the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Julian's immediate stunned denial was a hoarse whisper. My own mind reeled, a cold wave washing over me. This was the kind of crisis that could shatter everything we had so painstakingly built. Julian's bewildered protest, "That's impossible. We ended our arrangement over 8 months ago, before my wedding," felt like a lifeline. But Seraphina was quick to sever it. "Did we?" she challenged, a cruel smile twisting her lips. "I seem to recall a rather passionate farewell encounter just 2 weeks before your wedding day. Surely you haven't forgotten already?" My blood ran cold, a chilling realization seizing me. 2 weeks before our wedding, Julian had disappeared for an entire day, claiming urgent business in London. At the time, I had been too consumed with preparations, too focused on my own quiet defiance to press him for details. Now the memory surfaced, a bitter taste on my tongue. Julian's uncertainty, the momentary flicker of guilt in his eyes, was a devastating blow. "Oh, but it did," Seraphina continued, reveling in the doubt she had sown between us. "You were so distraught about your forced marriage to this plain little mouse. You needed comfort from a real woman." Her gaze, sharp and cruel, finally settled on me. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Your Grace, but I couldn't let my child grow up a bastard when his father is a duke." The room fell silent again, heavier this time, imbued with the immense weight of her words. A bastard heir. The implications for Elias, our precious son, were immense. A direct threat to his inheritance, his legitimacy, our family's standing. My mind raced, searching for the cracks in her facade, the truth hidden beneath her manipulative sorrow. I held Seraphina's calculating gaze, my expression carefully neutral. Something about her story, however, felt off. The timing, precisely 6 months, was almost too convenient, too perfectly aligned to challenge Elias's place as heir. Her desperation, thinly veiled beneath a veneer of righteous indignation, was also too obvious. She spoke of her child's legitimacy, yet her eyes held the hungry glint of a woman cornered, a woman seeking a different kind of salvation. I knew too well the precarious position of women in our society, especially those who, like Seraphina, had lost their financial security with the cessation of a duke's patronage. She needed money, and she needed it badly. My analytical mind, honed through my own trials, began to sift through the inconsistencies, connecting the dots of her likely motivations. My voice, I noticed, was calm, almost conversational, a stark contrast to the thrumming tension in the Duke's study. Lady Seraphina, her dark hair a dramatic frame for her defiant face, watched me with a glint of challenge. "When exactly did this encounter take place?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. The question hung in the air, a silken thread of inquiry that belied its steel. Julian beside me remained silent, his hand resting lightly on my arm, a silent anchor. I felt his presence, a new strength born of our shared journey, and drew confidence from it. Seraphina, who had expected a tearful accusation perhaps, or a furious demand, visibly stumbled. Her carefully constructed narrative, designed for emotional impact, was not built for precision. I told you 2 weeks before your wedding, Your Grace," she stammered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. "Yes, but what day specifically? What time? Where precisely did this passionate farewell unfold?" My tone remained even, each word a slow, deliberate drop of water wearing away at stone. I saw Julian's eyes widen, a dawning understanding in their depths. This was not the meek Lyra he had once dismissed. This was the strategist. A flush of crimson bloomed on Seraphina's cheeks, her earlier defiance beginning to crack under the weight of specific inquiry. Well, it was," she began, searching for a convincing detail. But I gave her no quarter. I stepped forward, my gown rustling softly, a sound like autumn leaves shifting on polished marble. "Actually, Lady Seraphina," I interjected, a small, dangerous smile touching my lips. The same smile I suspected, Julian remembered from that day in his study. 2 weeks before our wedding was April 3rd. On that precise day, my husband, the Duke of Caldwell, was at his cousin's estate in Yorkshire, attending a hunting party. There were at least 20 witnesses who can confirm his presence there for the entire weekend. Julian's jaw dropped, a silent gasp escaping him. He had not anticipated my meticulous recall, my memory for details, nor the quiet power of a diary entry. "You're lying to protect him," Seraphina cried, her voice rising in desperation, her flush deepening to an angry scarlet. "Hardly," I replied, my voice still perfectly composed. "I remember that weekend quite clearly because I was rather put out that he chose hunting over assisting with wedding preparations. I even recorded my irritation in my diary, which is both dated and witnessed by my maid. A 12-hour journey each way, Lady Seraphina, for a secret rendezvous? It seems rather unlikely." Julian squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of my triumph and his own profound relief. Seraphina's composure, once so unshakable, began to fracture. The vivid image of Julian far away, surrounded by witnesses, had stolen her primary weapon. I moved closer, a deliberate, quiet advance that seemed to shrink the opulent study around her. My eyes, I knew, were sharp as a hawk's, dissecting her every twitch, every nervous flicker. "But let us, for argument's sake, Lady Seraphina," I continued, my voice smooth, almost soothing, yet carrying an undeniable edge. "Presume you are speaking the truth. You claim to be 6 months pregnant with my husband's child." Her chin, which had sagged, lifted again, a desperate attempt at defiance. "Yes," she said, her voice strained but firm. "Then you won't mind, surely, having Dr. Albright examine you to confirm the timing?" I proposed, my suggestion hanging in the air like a spider's silken trap. "He is, after all, a man of great experience, having delivered dozens of babies. He can determine with certainty how far along you truly are. If you are genuinely 6 months pregnant, the evidence will be indisputable, will it not?" At the mention of medical proof, the last vestiges of Seraphina's confident expression crumbled, revealing the raw fear beneath. She knew, as did I, that my words had cornered her, leaving no honorable path of retreat. "I don't need to prove anything to you," Seraphina retorted, her voice thin and reedy, devoid of its earlier conviction. Her gaze darted between Julian and me, seeking a weakness, an opening, but finding only a united front. My own voice, however, had shed its conversational lightness, hardening to the texture of cold steel. "Oh, but you do, Lady Seraphina," I replied, each word a hammer blow. "You have swept into my home, uninvited, and leveled the most serious accusations against my husband. You have claimed adultery, and worse, that your unborn child has rights to his estate, potentially challenging the legitimacy of my own son, Elias." Julian, who had been a silent, amazed observer, now watched me with a profound admiration that warmed me, even amidst the chill of confrontation. He saw, I knew, the same relentless logic I had once turned against him. "These are not trivial matters," I pressed on, my voice resonating with an unyielding authority. "And such grave claims require undeniable proof. Without it, your words are nothing more than malicious slander, an attempt to sow discord and ruin." Seraphina's face grew even paler, her eyes wide with the dawning realization of the legal and social precipice upon which she stood. But I was not yet finished. My smile, though still present, was now less dangerous, more knowing. It was the smile of someone who held all the cards, not merely some. "Furthermore, Lady Seraphina," I continued, my voice returning to a honeyed, almost sympathetic tone that belied the cutting nature of my words, "I have, in the course of my duties as Duchess, been making certain inquiries about your financial situation. It appears you have accumulated quite substantial debts since losing your previous source of income." I watched her intently, noting the subtle flinch, the sudden tightening of her jaw. "Gambling debts, shopping debts, overdue rent on that expensive townhouse you can no longer afford." I paused, allowing the weight of each revelation to settle upon her. "Lord Devereux, for instance, mentioned quite casually that you owe him nearly £3,000 from card games, and Mrs. Miller at the milliner's shop lamented only yesterday that your account is months overdue. It seems quite the unfortunate coincidence, does it not?" Seraphina's face had gone from pale to an ashen white, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and utter humiliation. She knew, as did Julian, that I had not only exposed her lie, but also the desperate motive behind it. Julian, now fully understanding my strategy, stepped forward, his presence a solid, unyielding force beside me. His hand, which had been on my arm, now moved to my back, a gesture of unwavering support. "Catherine," he said, his voice firm, entirely devoid of the uncertainty he had displayed earlier, "if you leave now and never ever repeat these lies again, Lyra and I will ensure your debts are paid and provide you with enough funds to start afresh somewhere else, far from London society's whispers." His words were a lifeline, offered with an uncharacteristic generosity, a reflection of the man he was becoming. "But," he continued, his tone hardening, "if you persist with this charade, if you dare to continue this malicious fabrication, I will not hesitate. I will have you thoroughly investigated for fraud and blackmail, and I assure you the consequences will be far more severe than a simple loss of reputation." Seraphina looked between us, her desperate calculation replaced by a chilling clarity of defeat. She saw our united front, two minds working as one, and knew she was truly outmatched. The trap of truth had sprung. The silence in the study stretched, broken only by the steady tick of the grandfather clock. Seraphina's shoulders, once held so defiantly, finally sagged. The fight had drained from her, leaving behind only the stark reality of her desperation. "You can't prove I'm lying," she whispered, but the conviction had entirely fled her voice. It was a dying ember, a last, futile protest. My gaze remained unwavering, steady as the flame of a candle. "We don't have to prove you're lying, Lady Seraphina," I replied, my voice calm, almost gentle now. "You have to prove you're telling the truth, and we both know you cannot do that." The weight of that truth, undeniable and crushing, settled upon her. She looked utterly defeated, a woman cornered and stripped of every weapon. I need money," she finally admitted, her voice barely audible. "I have nowhere else to turn. No one else will help me." It was a raw confession, a glimpse into the unforgiving world that had shaped her choices. In that moment, a flicker of something unexpected stirred within me, a flash of sympathy, not for her malicious intent, but for the stark reality of her powerlessness. I remembered what it was like to be trapped, to feel at the mercy of others' whims and the relentless currents of societal expectations. Lady Seraphina, despite her cruel actions, was a woman caught in the same unforgiving system that had once threatened to consume me. Women, stripped of financial autonomy, often found themselves with few honorable choices. "The offer stands, Lady Seraphina," I said, my voice softer now, imbued with a genuine compassion that seemed to startle her. "Julian and I will help you get back on your feet, but not through lies and blackmail. There are other ways to solve your problems, paths that preserve your dignity, not destroy it." She looked at me, a profound confusion in her eyes, perhaps not having expected such grace from the woman she had tried to ruin. It was a moment where the sacred depth of forgiveness met the personal intimacy of understanding, a testament to the transformative power of a love forged in fire. The grand study, once a fortress of Julian's isolation and pride, now felt like a haven, warmed by the afternoon sun streaming through tall windows. Lady Seraphina had departed, leaving behind not lingering bitterness, but a quiet understanding of Lyra's sharp brilliance. Julian, still marveling at the effortless way his wife had dismantled the deceit, turned to her, his heart swelling with a gratitude he had once thought himself incapable of feeling. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice soft with genuine wonder, still holding her close. "How did you see through her tangled web of lies so quickly?" Lyra nestled against him, tilted her head, a confident, knowing smile gracing her lips. "I look, Julian," she replied, her voice a gentle murmur, rich with a quiet power. "I listen. I observe the hidden currents beneath polite society, the subtle motivations, the quiet vulnerabilities, the desperate calculations. It is an art I cultivated out of necessity once, but now," she moved further into his embrace, her eyes meeting his, bright and clear. "Now I use those very skills to protect what is ours, to shield our family, our home, and our son's future from any shadows that might threaten them." Julian tightened his embrace, the scent of her lavender and strength a grounding presence. He had watched, amazed, as she had calmly, methodically, disarmed a threat that would have once sent him spiraling into drunken despair and impulsive rage. Her composure, her precise questioning, her unwavering logic, even her unexpected offer of grace to Seraphina, it had been magnificent. "You were magnificent," he whispered against her hair, a profound admiration coloring his tone. "The way you navigated such treacherous waters, offering not just a challenge, but a path towards redemption, even for one who sought to harm us." Lyra leaned back slightly, her gaze tender. "We are partners now, Julian," she reminded him, her voice a soft, loving affirmation. "Your challenges are mine, your enemies, mine. But more importantly, the legacy we build for Elias, the reputation we uphold, affects us all. I would not stand by and let a desperate woman unravel the precious tapestry we have woven together." Her words were a promise, a testament to the unbreakable bond they had forged through fire. Later that evening, the drawing room offered a sanctuary of flickering firelight and soft shadows. Baby Elias gurgled happily on a plush blanket between them, a tangible symbol of their hard-won peace. Julian reached for Lyra's hand, intertwining their fingers, his gaze thoughtful as he watched their son. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, the question a whisper against the quiet crackle of the flames. "The way we started? All the pain and the conflict?" Lyra paused, her eyes soft and deep like the moss in a shaded forest, resting first on Elias, then on Julian. "I regret the cruelty you once felt the need to inflict," she said, her voice touched with a wistful sorrow. "And I regret that I felt the need to respond with manipulation and a cold calculation of my own. Those were born of hurt and pride." She squeezed his hand gently. "But I cannot regret the outcome, for it was through that crucible of fire, Julian, that we truly found ourselves, and in doing so, found each other." Their arduous journey, once a torment, had become the bedrock of their strength. We learn things about each other and ourselves, Lyra continued, her gaze unwavering. Things that perhaps we might never have discovered otherwise in a conventional match. We were stripped bare, forced to confront our deepest fears and our gravest failings. Our love was not born of convenience or fleeting passion, but was tested by fire, refined through conflict, and forged in the crucible of vulnerability. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with a profound intimacy. And now our bond is stronger than most couples ever get to be, because we have seen each other at our absolute worst, Julian. We have wrestled with our demons, shared our darkest truths, and chosen to love each other anyway. There are no illusions between us, no false pretenses, only a raw, enduring honesty. Her words hung in the air, a testament to a connection forged in the depths of adversity. Julian brought her hand to his lips, pressing a tender kiss to her knuckles. "I love you, Lyra Caldwell," he declared, his voice thick with emotion, resonating with a truth that had taken a lifetime to discover. "Not because I have to, not because society expects it of a duke, but because you are the most remarkable, astonishing, and truly beautiful person I have ever known. You saw the broken boy beneath the arrogant man, and you dared to challenge him to become better." Lyra's eyes softened further, brimming with an unconditional love that mirrored his own. "And I love you too, my Duke," she replied, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "All of you. The man you were, flawed and lost. The man you have become, humble and kind. And the man you are still becoming, with every choice you make to lead with courage and compassion. You are my chosen love, Julian, and that, above all else, is my greatest treasure." The peaceful ambiance of the room, once so foreign to Julian's heart, now felt like home. We sat in the drawing room, the scent of lavender and old paper mingling in the air, a gentle warmth emanating from the hearth. Our son, Elias, gurgled contentedly on a soft blanket between us, a tiny beacon of the life we had so painstakingly built. It was in these quiet moments, watching the play of firelight on his cherubic face, that the uniqueness of our journey truly settled upon my heart. Our marriage had not begun with tender glances or whispered promises, but with a duel of wills, a clash of pride and wounded spirit. It had been a union forged in the very fires of conflict, a forced contract meant for convenience, yet it had become something far more sacred. Julian, once the embodiment of a duke's cold entitlement, and I, once a meek pawn in his game, had somehow, against all odds, transformed cruelty into kindness. Our love, tested by the unforgiving heat of humiliation and the chilling depths of despair, now bloomed with a resilience neither of us could have ever foreseen. We understood with a profound certainty that our story was not one of innocent romance, but of powerful redemption, a love earned through struggle, built brick by painful brick on a foundation of honesty and growth. Julian, the man who now sat beside me tracing gentle patterns on Elias's tiny hand, was a ghost of his former self. The cruel Duke was gone, vanished like a shadow consumed by dawn. No longer did his presence cast a pall over Blackwood Manor, nor did his words carry the biting sting of condescension. Instead, a quiet strength emanated from him, a humility born of having faced his own failings and emerged, not broken, but remade. He had learned, through the arduous lessons I had so fiercely delivered, that true power lay not in commanding fear or tearing others down, but in the profound act of lifting them up. I watched him sometimes, catching glimpses of him speaking with a tenant about a struggling crop, or sharing a genuine laugh with a stable hand about a mischievous colt. In those moments I saw the man I had glimpsed in the garden, reading poetry, the man I had fallen in love with before his words shattered my heart. He was no longer trying to prove his dominance, but rather striving to prove his worth, not to society, but to his own conscience, to his family, and to the legacy he now actively chose to build. And I, Lyra Beaumont, once Lady Fairfax, now Duchess Caldwell, had found my rightful place as his equal. The meek pawn, the quiet lady everyone could ignore, had indeed become the lioness I had promised. But my strength was no longer solely in defiance or manipulation. It had matured, softened, and deepened into a powerful partnership. Julian and I moved through our days as two halves of a whole, our hands often clasped, our gazes meeting in unspoken understanding. My strategic mind, once honed for retribution, was now applied to nurturing our estate, advocating for its people, and enriching our shared life. I walked beside Julian, not behind him, our footsteps echoing the new rhythm of Blackwood Manor, a rhythm of mutual respect and shared purpose. My strength, I realized, was not just in what I could conquer, but in what I could build alongside the man who had once sought to break me. It was in the quiet confidence of knowing I was seen, valued, and loved for every facet of my being, a partner in every sense of the word. Our love story, I knew, would one day be whispered through the halls of Blackwood Manor, not as a fanciful tale of instant romance, but as something far more profound. It would be a testament, passed down through generations, that even the most damaged hearts could learn to truly love, and that the greatest transformations often arose from the courage to face one's deepest failings. Perhaps one day, children would gather by the fire, listening to the tale of the Duke and the Duchess who found their way to each other through a labyrinth of pride and pain. They would hear of candlelit ballrooms where unspoken desires hung heavy in the air, of letters sealed in wax that carried grave pronouncements, of chapel bells that rang not just for a wedding, but for a war of wills. They would imagine the rain on marble steps, mirroring tears, and the candlelight through silk curtains, illuminating a path to forgiveness. It would be a timeless narrative, woven with threads of redemption and grace, proving that destiny's path is often crooked, but always leads to where true hearts are meant to be. In the end, my defiance had achieved more than merely shattering Julian's pride. It had irrevocably shattered the insidious cycle of cruelty and control that had defined his family for generations. The cold, imposing legacy of the Blackwoods, built on fear and dominance, had been replaced. In its stead bloomed a new era, defined by unwavering respect, a partnership forged in fire, and a genuine love that permeated every corner of our home. This, I understood, was our greatest victory, not over each other, but over the shadows of the past. Our journey had been arduous, marked by profound pain, but it had led us to a place of profound peace. It taught us that true strength lay not in breaking others, but in building them up, and that the most beautiful love stories are often the ones that refuse to conform to expectation, daring instead to forge their own path toward a shared, hopeful horizon. How many lives, I wondered, could be transformed if only they dared to face their own failings with such courage? The fire in the hearth cast long, dancing shadows across the drawing room walls, a gentle counterpoint to the quiet evening. Julian sat beside me, his hand finding mine, our fingers intertwining in a gesture so familiar, so profoundly right, it felt as though it had always been thus. Yet there were moments, quiet and sacred like this one, when my mind drifted back to the tempestuous beginnings, to the biting words and the bitter taste of betrayal. How could two souls flung together by cruel circumstance and prideful defiance forge a bond so deep, so unshakable? We spoke of it often, these whispered reflections on the strange path that had led us here. Was it truly chance that I had stood outside his study door that fateful day, a forgotten book in my hand? Or was it destiny, a quiet, insistent current guiding us through the storm? What began as a forced union, a battleground for two wounded spirits, had slowly, irrevocably transformed into something else entirely. It was a love that felt less like a choice and more like a profound recognition, an echoing truth that had always existed, waiting to be unearthed beneath layers of pain and pride. The candlelight danced upon his face, softening the lines of worry he once wore, replacing them with a gentle serenity. This love, once a forced contract, now felt like a whisper of destiny, a sacred promise murmured between two hearts that had found their way home. My study, once a fortress of solitude and resentment, now felt imbued with a lightness I had never known. The polished mahogany desk, where I once plotted cruelties, now held ledgers detailing estate improvements, plans for the tenants' welfare, all born from discussions with Lyra. I found myself often gazing at the small, framed portrait of her I kept on the mantelpiece, a candid sketch caught during one of her charity meetings, a soft smile gracing her lips, her eyes alight with quiet purpose. How had she seen it? The man I could be, buried beneath layers of pride and inherited bitterness. My father's words, sharp as shards of glass, had shaped my youth, convincing me that strength lay in dominance, in a cold, unfeeling control. Yet Lyra, this quiet lady I had so carelessly dismissed, had looked past the cruel duke, past the broken boy, and seen something worth saving. She had not merely reacted to my darkness, she had illuminated it, forcing me to confront the shadows within myself. There was no grand speech, no dramatic intervention that broke me, but a patient, relentless unraveling of my defenses, a steady hand guiding me toward my own inherent kindness. Her unwavering belief in my potential, resolute even in my worst moments, was a quiet, insistent force that had reshaped my very soul. I owed her more than gratitude. I owed her the man she believed I could become. The late afternoon sun painted golden stripes across the lawn where Elias, now a sturdy toddler, chased a butterfly with joyous, uncoordinated steps. His laughter was a melody, a constant reminder of the precious life we had almost lost, the life that had cemented our fragile bond into something unbreakable. Julian sat beside me on the wrought iron bench, his gaze soft as he watched our son. "He carries so much joy," Julian murmured, his voice hushed. "He carries the hope we built from the ashes," I replied, leaning my head on his shoulder. "A hope born of a grand act of courage, yours." He knew what I meant. The choice. The moment he chose my life over his heir, over duty, over all the expectations that had defined him. We never spoke of forgetting the pain, for that would be a lie, a disservice to the difficult journey we had traversed. Instead, our love was built on a deeper truth, the courageous choice to forgive. To forgive not just the words spoken in anger, or the plans for humiliation, but the very circumstances that had bound us. Julian's silent acceptance of my reminders, never defensive, always reflective, was a testament to his transformation. Our love wasn't perfect, but it was real, forged in the crucible of conflict, stronger for having transcended the hurts that once threatened to consume us. Forgiveness, I knew, was not an absolution of past wrongs, but the steadfast foundation upon which a future could truly flourish. The grand ballroom of Blackwood Manor, once a stage for Lyra's subtle manipulations and my public mortification, now hosted evenings of genuine conviviality. Tonight, a quiet gathering of friends, not sycophants, filled the space. I watched Lyra move through the room, her presence radiating a grace that drew admiration, not just politeness. I remembered the whispers, the snide remarks that had followed us in the early days of our marriage, society's cruel delight in the tame duke and his clever wife. They had expected a scandal, a dramatic downfall, a confirmation of their cynical worldview. Instead, we offered them a different narrative, a story of a love that defied the very soil from which it sprang. Our bond, once a subject of gossip and speculation, had slowly, unequivocally earned their respect. It was not a fairy tale of instant enchantment, but a testament to something far more profound. The arduous, often painful journey of two souls choosing to heal, to understand, and to build something sacred out of shattered pride. We had not merely survived, we had thrived, crafting a partnership that was stronger, more resilient than any love born of convenience or immediate affection. This unconventional success, born of conflict and culminating in quiet joy, stood as a beacon, proving that love, in its purest form, could indeed grow in the most unexpected and challenging of soils. It was a victory not just for us, but for the very idea of second chances. The soft glow of the nightlight cast a gentle halo around Elias's sleeping form. His tiny chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, a picture of perfect peace. Julian and I stood by his crib, a silent vigil that was both sacred and deeply personal. We had just sung him his favorite lullaby, our voices a quiet harmony, and now in the hush of the nursery, our hearts spoke in unspoken promises. He will never know the shadows, Julian whispered, his hand gently stroking Elias's soft hair. The ones that haunted my own childhood. No, I affirmed, my hand finding Julian's, our fingers interlacing. He will know strength born of kindness, courage tempered with compassion. We will teach him that true power lies not in dominance, but in uplifting others. This was the most profound legacy we could offer our son, not just a title or an estate, but a future free from the cycle of cruelty that had once defined Julian's family. We had seen its corrosive effects, how it twisted hearts and bred resentment. Now with Elias, we had the chance to sow different seeds. His future would be a tapestry woven with threads of understanding, empathy, and respect. A vibrant contrast to the stark, unforgiving landscape of Julian's past. Our journey had been arduous, but it had led us to this sacred purpose, to ensure that the Duke Elias Caldwell would be a man defined by love, not by fear. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of our master suite, the room Lyra had once redecorated to assert her authority, now truly felt like our haven. The soft candlelight flickered, casting a warm, golden glow over the familiar space. I held Lyra close, her head resting against my chest, the steady rhythm of her breath a comfort, a truth. Our love had once been a battleground, fraught with tension and the clash of wills. It had been a place of wounds and hard-won lessons. Yet through it all, it had transformed. Now it was our sanctuary, our quiet harbor in a world that still held its share of challenges. It was our compass, guiding us through the complexities of estate management, the occasional societal whispers, and the endless joys and trials of parenthood. Whenever doubts arose, whenever the echoes of my old self threatened to resurface, I simply looked at Lyra, felt her steady presence, and remembered the truth we had found in each other. We had stripped away the illusions, faced our deepest failings, and chosen to love, not despite them, but because of them. This enduring love, forged in fire and tempered by forgiveness, was our heart's true north, a constant, unwavering beacon in the ever-shifting currents of life. It was a love built to last, a testament to the profound beauty of second chances and the sacred journey of becoming truly whole, together.